Hey y'all, this is PureLunacy. I know I was supposed to wait till next week, and I do have a great discussion coming up with a great friend of mine. However, I have something on my mind and on my heart that I want to discuss, so I'm just gonna put out a video today because I can. This is PureLunacy. I do what I want. The discourse in our country right now is really evolving, and the discourse is specifically in regards to racism and discrimination and highlighting the plight of blackness in America. However, I have an issue. I have an issue because the gatekeepers of this discourse have decided, and I saw even earlier today there's a discussion regarding equity, and the only persons included are those who are within the parameters of what is considered blackness. And someone mentioned, you missed the mark here on equity. Where are the Latin folks? And someone goes on to state this isn't the space for that conversation. And I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that because blackness in America isn't identified about whether you're from America or not. Blackness in America does not pertain to whether you're American or Latin American. Blackness has to do with the African diaspora and those who are the ancestors of people who had to suffer through the slave trade, segregation, discrimination, and the realities not only of our past but of our present. And I find it to be a spit in the face of our ancestors when people say you're Latin American, so you're not allowed to be part of this discourse. Just because the ships did not land in America does not mean that my blackness diminishes and that of anyone else in Latin America. And I have a problem with this, oh, well, you're brown, you don't count. Well, if we're gonna have to use that kind of concept, Langston Hughes doesn't count. Rosa Parks doesn't count. W.E.B. Du Bois doesn't count. Crispus Attucks doesn't count. Barack Obama doesn't count. Beyonce doesn't count. Why am I listing these people? These are all people who in their heritage and ancestry have what is considered mixed race. I use quotations. I believe it's a social construct with real physical aspects. But going back to the reality here, in America, blackness by certain gatekeepers of the conversation excludes people who are Latin American, and I find it to be a disgrace. A disgrace. America, if we look at the percentages of the slave trade from Africa directly to America, at most received about 5% of slaves out of the slave trade. If we look at the percentages around the country and the world, we'll see that the percentages increase in other locations. In fact, the country that received the most slaves directly out of Africa was Brazil, the country that my family is from. So I have a problem when we're discussing equity. We're supposed to be discussing equity, racial discrimination, and we are exclusionary. We are excluding the voice of Latin Americans because it doesn't fall within the parameters of whoever the gatekeeper is regarding this discussion. I have a problem with that. That is discrimination within the very African diaspora. That is a spit in the face of our ancestors. I have a problem. Latin Americans are black lives. Now, not all Americans are black, is that correct? The same can be said for Latin Americans. Not all Latin Americans are black. So we should include those who have that history and those who recognize it. And now for the Latin American community, let me say something to the Latin American community. We need to stop whitewashing our history. Amara la Negra no es la única que es latina y negra. Amara la Negra is not the only Latin woman who is black and Latin, okay? We need to stop whitewashing our history, and we need to recognize the prowess and be proud of where we come from and who we come from. Just like the predecessors in America, like I mentioned, Langston Hughes, Rosa Parks, even Barack Obama, there's a mixture and there's beauty in that, but we need to also recognize our blackness as Latin Americans. Latinos, nosotros tenemos que reconocer que nosotros también tenemos la sangre africana en nuestra sangre. I'm peeved. I'm ticked off that in the moment where we're supposed to have that discourse, in the moment where we're supposed to expand our minds, expand our hearts, and expand the conversation to be inclusionary of all those, and specifically all Black lives, the truth is there's a failure when we exclude groups because they don't fall within the parameters of what is considered Blackness, and therefore it is a failure in the equity and inclusion of everyone who has suffered due to the reality of racism and discrimination due to the color of their skin. This is pure lunacy. I'm ticked off. Black Lives Matter? Absolutely. But if you're not going to include all Black lives, then you are failing. It's a disgrace. It's pure lunacy.